Hello guys, welcome to my channel. Ayaka's rerun is finally here, and here are a few must-know tips for playing Ayaka. Ayaka's special dash lets you go inside the ground, and it applies cryo to enemies when she comes up from the ground. Now this is an important part of her kit. Applying cryo to enemies through a dash restores 10 stamina and further provides 18% cryo damage bonus for 10 seconds. So usually before her skills, you would want to apply cryo on the enemies using a special sprint. Now Ayaka's normal attack combos. Ayaka's normal and charge attacks are an important part of her kit as they deal a considerable amount of damage and are used to fill in the gaps between elemental skill and burst casts. There are few various normal and charge attack combos that you can use, starting with the N1C combo. This is an inefficient combo which consumes a lot of stamina, but it is great in AoE scenarios. Also, it is the best one to use for attacking the enemies trapped inside Venti's burst, and it also takes less time to use. The N2C combo is generally the best one as it has a high damage and also less stamina consumption than the N1C combo. It is the most commonly used combo. N3C is similar in terms of damage to the N2C combo, but it is used to fill longer time in rotations. Also, since you are normal attacking more in this one, it has better synergy with Xingqiu or Yelan. N4C combo has higher application but less damage. So overall N1C is great when used with Venti, and N2C is generally used as it gives high damage in short duration with less stamina consumption, making it useful for filling in the gaps. An instant freeze trick for freeze teams. It is highly likely the Hydro Catalyst user, that is Mona or Kokomi, can get staggered when you switch into them. Just like in this clip, after using Kazuha's skill, I switch to Kokomi and she gets staggered before I get to use her skill. However, the normal attacks come out almost instantly as soon as you switch into them. Quickly press the left click then E to freeze the enemies and avoid getting staggered. It might be difficult for mobile players, so don't force yourself to learn this trick as it is not that important. This is just a helpful trick that makes your gameplay smoother. Using the book trick. Book trick is pressing the F1 key to open the guidebook. This pauses the game but the elemental particles still travel. So using this trick you can funnel the energy particles to Ayaka or any character you wish while also saving some time and not losing any buffs. Alternatively, you can open your map or the wish system in order to pause the game. Personally, I don't use this trick as I almost always forget about it, but it is still extremely useful if you learn to use it. For Ayaka's rotation, now we know that Ayaka's dash gives 18% cryo damage bonus. So this means that you would want to use her dash and apply cryo on enemies to get the bonus before using her burst to snapshot the 18% buff into her burst. However, you need to know that if your Ayaka is already positioned well, for instance, if she is in a position from where you can hit all the enemies using her burst, then you would want to avoid using a dash as it might put you in a weird position and the burst might not hit all the enemies. The next tip is for players who have Shenhe. While using Ayaka with Shenhe, you mostly want to use Shenhe's tap skill. The whole skill provides more energy particles and more icy quills, but it has longer cooldown. On the other hand, the tap version has lower cooldown. As a result, using a tap version is much better as you can use the skill twice per rotation, which results in more icy quills and more energy particles. Also, Shenhe's passive provides more elemental skill and burst damage if you tap her skill. Tap version also makes Shenhe move forward, which is helpful for closing your distances between the enemies. Regarding Ayaka's team comps. With the addition of Furina, the lineup of Ayaka, Furina, Shenhe and Jean gives her the most damage. However, this team only works in single target situations. For Ayaka, I would recommend you to use a crowd control unit like Kazuha or Venti in order to group the enemies and make sure Ayaka's burst hits all of them. Without a CC unit, it becomes difficult to hit enemies in a group, and worst of all, Ayaka might send her burst in the wrong direction. So I would prefer a team like Ayaka, Kokomi, Kazuha, Shenhe, which used to be a previous best team, or a team like Ayaka, Furina, Charlotte and Kazuha. In the Furina team, you will see less damage numbers from Ayaka, but Furina makes up for it with her off-field damage. Also, Kazuha here can double swell Hydro and Cryo, increasing both Ayaka and Furina's damage, which overall results in more team damage. Also, it is much easier to maintain a summon's uptime when compared to Kokomi's Jellyfish. For F2Ps, Ayaka, Xingqiu, Diona or Layla and Sucrose is usable. However, Furina, Kokomi and Mona are better characters for the Hydro slot, and instead of Sucrose, it is better to use Kazuha or Venti if you have them. And Shenhe or Rosaria are a better alternative for the cryo character slot if you are using Kokomi for Hydro application. Some players might think that Mona is the best option to use with Ayaka as she has the Omen buff. However, Kokomi has longer lasting skills which means better Hydro application, and she also has a much shorter fill time which makes her a better choice over Mona in freeze teams. Furina can also be one of the best options to use as she has good off-field damage and Hydro application along with some added team buffs. Just make sure to use a healer with her. Charlotte is the best healer to use as she lets you use Kazuha or Venti. Other decent Hydro supports you can use include Ayato, Xingqiu and Yelan. I don't recommend Barbara because of her extremely small AoE, but you can make it work by hugging the enemy if you have no other option. For our rotations, let's use the Ayaka, Mona, Diona, Kazuha team for example. You start with Diona's E, you can also use her Q if you want to. If your Diona is C6, then Kazuha can benefit from the 200 elemental mastery from her burst. Then follow it with Kazuha's E. Hold it to group the enemies, or if you don't need the CC, just tap. Then use his burst, switch to Mona, use her burst and E. Then switch to Ayaka, this will give her Mona Cillian Tails buff. Dash and apply cryo on the enemy, just make sure this doesn't ruin your position. Then use a normal attack if you have Mist Splitter, or just skip to using her E skill if you don't own it. Use her E and immediately follow it by her burst. Then you can use her normal attack combos, switch to Diona for energy, use Kazuha to refresh the buff, again switch back to Ayaka to use her skill and normal attacks to close the gap. After her burst is up, repeat the rotation. You can start the rotation with Ayaka's elemental skill if you have Amenoma to get a stack for Amenoma's passive. Now for Ayaka and Shenhe rotation. Let's use the Ayaka, Kokomi, Shenhe, Kazuha team as an example. You start with Shenhe's Q then E. Here we use her E at the end because it lasts only for 10 seconds. So you need to make sure you can cast Ayaka's burst within those 10 seconds. Then use Kazuha's E and burst. You can skip the burst to save some time, or if you need to hold the skill for crowd control. Then use Kokomi's skill and switch to Ayaka. Dash and apply cryo on the enemy, normal attack if you have Mist Splitter, and use a skill immediately followed by her burst. Now switch back to Shenhe. By now you should have Shenhe's skill ready to use. Use her skill again to buff Ayaka's hits. Then you can use Kazuha again to refresh the buff and use Ayaka's normal attacks and skill. Don't forget to refresh Kokomi's skill by using her burst. However, it won't be possible to do this rotation everywhere, as in this case we don't use Kazuha's crowd control. You don't have to strictly follow these rotations, it's easier if you think that you need to freeze the enemies and apply debuff on them or buff your characters. There can be many different rotations which suits your playing style. For example, watch this clip. Here I use Shenhe to quickly get near the enemies and use her burst. Then move to Kazuha and use his skill. Here I skip his burst as it takes time. Use Kokomi's skill and then switch to Ayaka. Then I use Shenhe to use her skill again, switch to Kazuha again to use his skill and clear the next wave of enemies. Ayaka's rotations are pretty flexible, so use them to your advantage according to the situation. Now let's move on to the rotation with Furina, Charlotte and Kazuha team. For AoE situations, start with Furina's E and Q, then move on to Ayaka and use her skill. Switch to Kazuha, hold his elemental skill for double swirl and grouping, then use his burst. Switch to Charlotte and use her EQ. Then switch to Ayaka, dash on the enemy and do a normal attack if you have Mist Splitter, then immediately use a skill and burst. You can skip the dash and normal attack part if your Ayaka is perfectly positioned. This rotation allows you to double swirl and lets you use Thrilling Tails on your Charlotte as long as you don't have any energy issues. For single target, start with Furina's E and Q, then Ayaka's dash plus E, after that Kazuha's Q and E, followed by Charlotte's E and Q, then switch to Ayaka and as always dash and normal attack if you have Mist Splitter, followed by a skill and burst. This allows you to double swirl cryo and hydro. Kazuha's burst absorbs cryo which prevents loss of cryo aura on the enemy, which is required to get the buffs. And it lets you use Cillian Tails on Charlotte. These rotations can be very stiff and inconsistent to execute unless you practice them. So you can do a much easier rotation. Here you start with Furina EQ, then Charlotte EQ, followed by Kazuha EQ, and then move on to Ayaka to use her skills. This is much easier and simpler rotation. Here you will be using Favonius on Charlotte as you won't be benefiting from the Cillian Tails. You can use Kazuha's elemental skill after Furina's burst, then do Charlotte's rotation and go back to Kazuha to use his burst and continue your rotation. This will let you swirl both Hydro and Cryo. Another tip for freeze teams. If your Hydro character's elemental skill is not ready, let's take Kokomi for example, her jellyfish is still in cooldown. You can apply Hydro on enemy and use Kazuha's burst to swirl Hydro. This is possible since Kazuha prioritizes Hydro over Cryo for infusion. Stop right now if you are going to make R5 Amenoma Kageuchi. Well, it's not like it's a bad weapon, but the new fountain craftable weapon, the finale of the deep, has a better DPS than this weapon as it has a higher base attack and as a result it better utilizes the attack buffs. If you take it to R5, it provides much more attack than Amenoma. In order to activate its passive, that is for clearing the life of Bond, you need to use a healer with Ayaka like Kokomi, Charlotte or Diona who are very common characters in freeze teams. It is still a strong option even if the life of Bond is not cleared. If you are planning to switch to this weapon from Amenoma, make sure to build enough energy charge on her, around 130 to 140% to have 100% uptime on her burst. Now coming back to Amenoma. It is not a bad option if you already have it at R5, as the energy refund can reduce your energy requirements by around 30 to 40%. So to make it short, Finale of the Deep is overall better, but you need to make sure you have enough energy recharge, and it is recommended to craft if you haven't made any weapon for Ayaka yet. If your artifacts don't have much energy recharge, you may want to stick with Amenoma. Also don't buy the Black Cliff, as these two craftable ones are much better option than it. If you have any questions regarding Ayaka's weapons, do let me know in the comments. Moving on to artifacts. Ayaka finally has a new artifact set that she can use, but the catch is that you can only use it with Furina. Yeah, you guessed it right, it's a Malachose Hunter. Blizzard Slayer is still Ayaka's best in slot, as it provides cryo damage bonus which buffs her entire kit and also gives 4% more crit rate. However, the Malachose Hunter can be used if you don't have good Blizzard pieces and get lot more crit damage and better stats with the Malachose Hunter pieces. It is better than the Blizzard Slayer in some scenarios, which I will discuss in detail in the next part. I am not recommending you to farm this set for Ayaka, but if you don't need the heart of the pieces, you can farm the Malachose Hunter instead and use the trash pieces to strong box the Blizzard Slayer. Or if you already have a good 4-piece Malachose Hunter, you can use that and rely on strongbox to get the Blizzard Slayer. Do keep in mind, as of now, Malachose Hunter works on Ayaka only if you have Furina in the team. Freeze teams are the best for Ayaka, there's no doubt about that. However, against unfreezable enemies like the bosses, it becomes a problem for Ayaka. Bosses are immune to crowd control as well, which makes crowd control units lose value in the team. Kazuha is still great due to his amazing buffs. Venti's value gets decreased by a lot, so you may consider using Sucrose instead, as she can use the 3 Intels and also give elemental damage bonus if you have her at C6. Also, the Hydro characters lose value in this team, which makes running mono cryo teams a much better option, but you need to keep in mind that you lose out on 20% crit rate from the Blizzard Slayer. However, there is one Hydro character that saves the day, and it's Furina. Furina's buff can boost Ayaka's damage by a ton. She also has high off-field damage, which doesn't need any normal attacks to trigger. Also, Furina unlocks the Malachose Hunter set for Ayaka. She loses out on the 15% cryo damage bonus, but she gets an extra 16% crit rate. While the normal attack and charge attack damage from Malachose Hunter won't buff her burst and skill, but it is still useful as Ayaka uses the normal and charge attacks between her rotations. This lets you build more crit damage on Ayaka. Along with Ayaka, it is highly crucial to make sure your supports have the right equipments. You may want to use Favonius weapons on your supports. Let's take Kazuha for example. You have his best in slot sword, that is Freedom Swan, but you only have 100% energy recharge on your Ayaka and are facing a lot of energy issues even with Favonius on your cryo support like Shenhe. So in such cases, it is better to use Favonius on Kazuha to make sure your rotations go uninterrupted. Also, if you are using Charlotte and Kazuha and you need to give Favonius weapon to one of them to fix your energy issues, then you can consider giving Favonius to Kazuha and use 3 Intels on Charlotte, which results in more damage for Ayaka. But flexibility wise, keeping Charlotte on 3 Intels can make your rotation stiff, so I usually use her with Favonius and use Freedom Swan or Iron Sting on Kazuha. Also, don't forget to check the artifacts on your supports. For Shenhe, don't fall for the 2-piece scam that you see on the recommended artifacts or in most of the videos online that use 2-piece set combinations to show their Shenhe's big PP attack. It's not a bad set to use, but Noblesse is much better option. It provides 20% more attack for Ayaka and Shenhe herself benefits from it as well. Also, the 20% more attack doesn't have any quota unlike Shenhe's skill, which only lasts for 5 hits. As a result, the 20% more attack becomes more beneficial. In Ayaka teams, you need to make sure that either one of your support has the Noblesse set so that they can buff your whole team. The Noblesse user can be Shenhe, Charlotte, Rosaria, Layla, etc. It is mostly the cryo supports. Mona and Kokomi can also utilize the Noblesse set, but their skills make them an excellent choice for the Tenacity of Millilith set, which lets your Ayaka benefit from both Tenacity and Noblesse set, that is 40% more attack. If you have more tips for Ayaka, feel free to share them. Do let me know in the comments if this video was helpful. Don't forget to like and share the video and subscribe for more Genshin Impact content. That's all for this video, thanks for watching.